This was the reality 2 years ago for some people returning from abroad. They had to spend time in a hotel in quarantine. Listen now to the flippant tone of some senior ministers and officials talking about this, published tonight by The Telegraph. The country's most senior civil servant, Simon Case, writes, "I just want to see some of the faces of people coming out of first class and into a Premier Inn shoebox." Just over a week later, Mr. Case asks Matt Hancock how many people we locked up in hotels yesterday. Mr. Hancock said none, adding 149 chose to enter the country and are now in quarantine hotels due to their own free will. Simon Case replied, "Hilarious." We now know that by this time loads of parties had happened in Westminster, which would later be investigated for breaking the government's own COVID rules, including the event at which the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the current one, Rishi Sunak, were fined. On March the 2nd, 2021, Matt Hancock shared a link to a news story that said a man and woman had been fined £10,000 each for failing to quarantine after a trip to Dubai. The Prime Minister replied, "Superb." Now, from a windowless bunker in the corner of this newsroom, all these messages and more to come are emerging, generating headlines and anger. In a statement, the former Health Secretary said, "I am hugely disappointed and sad at the massive betrayal and breach of trust. There is absolutely no public interest case for this. Releasing them in this way gives a partial, biased account to suit an anti-lockdown agenda."
Who has a pro-lockdown agenda? I mean, what is that? Is that a thing? You know, what is a pro-lockdown agenda? I think that absolutely I want to get to the heart of whether the repeated lockdowns were the right and proportionate response to the pandemic.
What about the argument that it isn't really in the public interest because this is partial and that the proper forum for an analysis of that is a public inquiry, not a drip, drip, drip in a newspaper over a couple of weeks?
Love the idea of a public inquiry. Let's do what Sweden did and wrap it up. They wrapped theirs up last year. So yes, in an ideal world, that is the proper forum. The public inquiry has currently no deadline whatsoever. People in this country deserve to know what really happened behind the scenes during the pandemic.
If that meant betraying Matt Hancock, that's fine.
Well, look, I take that seriously, of course I do, but ultimately the public interest was overwhelming, and it isn't about Matt Hancock. You know, this is something so much bigger.
Do you ever worry that no one will ever trust you again?
No, I don't, because I'm really good at what I do. I do stories in the public interest, and I make judgments.
Some find the contents of her exposé outrageous. Others, her decision to publish outrageous. Chris Mason, BBC News.